We are proud members of the Spy Podcast Network. Find out more at www.spypodcasts.com.
Hello and welcome to SpyHards podcast, where your hosts go deep undercover into the world of spy movies to decipher which films make the knock list. But remember, this information is strictly for your ears only. I'm Agent Scott.
And I'm Cam the Provocateur.
And Cam, the net is vast and infinite. And frankly, mind-boggling. So this film this week is kind of out of our depth a little bit. And so I thought what we needed to do was bring an actual expert in, because frankly, we're idiots.
That's true. I mean, we were out of our depth with Spy Kids 4, so...
Yeah, we knew we hit a wall at that point. So, our guest this week, it's Dannie from the Anime Summit podcast. Hello, Dannie.
Hello. How's it going, guys? Thank you for having me.
No, thank you for joining us. Now, we haven't spoiled the film, although if people read the title of this episode, they probably know what it is.
Right,
But
yeah.
Before we maybe get to the film itself, let's get to know you a little bit. So, we're talking about an anime film this week, and you do an anime podcast.
I do.
So, you must sort of like anime, I assume?
No, I hate anime. Like,
Right.
I can't stand it at all. I don't know why I'm on an anime podcast for it or anything.
This
No,
makes sense.
I'm totally kidding. I am a complete freaking otaku weeb. Like, you can even see, I mean, you can't see my desk, but I have full on, like, figures everywhere, everything, anything.
I'm going to write down otaku and weeb and try and figure those out as we do the episode, because they are new words to me.
Otaku is just like, it's a Japanese word for just like nerds, really.
Great, okay.
And people who are into like comic books and everything like that. So it's more so a Japanese term for nerd comics kind of thing.
So I guess we're
So.
spy otakus then.
Yes, you are.
Nice. Nailed it. Okay. Well, I mean, taking us back a little bit, what sort of brought you to anime originally? What were sort of your first entries, and how did you begin to enjoy it?
Oh gosh. Do we have like 3 hours? Because like that's
It's our show. We have as long as we'd like.
Well, as some would inside joke would say, well, I was born in 1990. So, no, I'm kidding. I was probably like 12 years old. So, and around that time, you know, Cartoon Network in the US was really big on trying to incorporate the anime world and everything, like Dragon Ball Z, Sailor Moon, even Pokemon and like Yu-Gi-Oh! And all that kind of stuff. So that's kind of what got me into it. And literally over time, it kind of just got really out of control. My mom thought it was a phase, and it's all like, oh, she's not going to like this anymore. It's fine. But 32 years old, and I'm still head over heels for anime. I kind of go on like binges where I'll just watch like 12 shows within like 2 weeks, and they have the expand of like 12 episodes to 24 episodes depending on what it is. So yeah, it's I can get pretty hardcore when it comes to watching things, and it involves anime.
So it's basically your sort of go-to form of entertainment then?
Yeah, pretty much. It's kind of like, you know, if I sit down or anything like that at the couch or anything, and I decide, you know, okay, what am I going to watch today? And, I'll dab into like real people shows, quote unquote. But definitely anime is my number one kind of like go to. This is what I mainly watch all the time. So, and being on an Anime Summit podcast, I kind of have to do that anyway.
It helps.
What are some of your favorites? Like the ones you really hold up as these are must-sees?
Oh my gosh, there's so many. Well, Sailor Moon is actually, of course, the number one that I would say everyone at least should watch. My all-time favorite would also be Fruits Basket, but the readaptation of it. And Cowboy Bebop is also another staple of the anime community. And of course, watch the dub for that for sure, because it's like one of the best dubs ever. So.
Well, it's interesting because, like, looking at your journey, it's similar to mine when it comes to anime. It just at some point I stopped watching it. I think.
Yeah, you have like I've had my break. Like I definitely had a point in time in my life where I wasn't watching anime and everything. And I want to say I started really getting into it when I was about 22, 23, around there, around my early 20s and stuff. And that's kind of when like podcasts started to become a really big thing and everything. So and that's kind of where I led to Anime Summit. So for those of you who don't know, I was actually a listener before I became a host of Anime Summit. So
don't go get any ideas, people. We're not hiring.
Yeah.
But yeah, I was myself the same. Dragon Ball Z, or Pokemon, I suppose. Cowboy Bebop, Sailor Moon. That was Cartoon Network was a big thing over here too. Toonami when it came on in the evening.
Oh yeah. Toonami, Adult Swim,
Yeah.
like those were like the I guess platforms, as you would call them, for television to show anime and everything.
And Cam, now when you first started watching television, it was a radio. It wasn't even television. So I mean,
That's right. We'd gather around the old squawk box and listen to old episodes of The Shadow, that sort of thing. Yeah. No. With me, I feel like I was probably just a few years removed from anime. I think if I'd been, because for me, when things like Pokemon and Sailor Moon really began to cross over, I was probably like just into my high school years. And
Okay.
it was just like, I just wasn't that interested in it. And I was into, I think more at that point, like, R-rated action movies and things like that. I think though, if I'd been more like 11, 12, 10, somewhere in that kind of area, I would have been into it because I remember, some of my friends' younger siblings got really into those shows. And now I go and, visit my friend and his kids. His kids are like, 4 and 2, and they're really into Pokemon and Bakugan and all of these sorts of things.
Well, Pokemon is, of course, like a family-friendly thing. So, and that will always be like the go-to. Every kid will start with Pokemon when they start getting into anime and stuff. But I will tell you, Cam, there is anime that is for strictly adults.
Oh, I know.
So...
We're going to talk about it this week, but I think also because of my age, the exposure wasn't there as much. Like I grew up watching Siskel and Ebert, and that's how I began to actually get some of these titles being referenced. Like they didn't play in theaters in my little world near me, and it was kind of like I'd go to the video store and they weren't on the shelves.
Well, you didn't get the sort of Toonami Cartoon Network wave. You were part of the action cinema of the 80s, Arnold Schwarzenegger wave, where that was sort of your folk hero. They were the people you were looking up to.
Yeah.
Not only that, but like in the 80s, anime wasn't really distributed internationally all that much. Like it wasn't until the 90s where they started bringing over Dragon Ball Z, Sailor Moon, all that kind of stuff. So, but now with technology, we have easy access to all this anime that we have now. So
yeah, and like it just internet culture alone didn't really kick in till I was around grade 10 or 11.
Right.
So
Yeah.
that was
Yeah.
also an element of it as well. Like I was,
Mhm.
so I was like a major Star Wars kid around that period into
I
my
mean,
teenage years as well.
yeah.
But it was
Yeah.
like very easy to talk to anyone about Star Wars. Like anyone around you had watched those movies versus anime was something that had I been on the internet at the time, you would have found those people to talk to. But in my little world, that just wasn't the case.
It was
Right.
definitely more like for me, it was like a playground thing. You'd go to school the next day and be like, hey, did you see what happened to Cell on Dragon Ball Z? Like,
Mm.
Yeah.
whoa, he turned into something else, and then you'd all just talk about it. It was like the water cooler stuff for the playground, I suppose.
Right.
But that's the 90s and early noughties for me, at least, anyway. But I think before we pivot into the film, we do need to check your spy credentials, Danny.
Oh, I hope I can pass.
Well, this is a spy movie podcast, so we need to ask you the question: what are some of your favorite spy movies?
Okay. So this was actually, I mean, at first I thought this was going to be difficult because when you asked me this before recording, I was like, oh shit, like I don't think I've ever watched any spy movies that I could remember. I'm like, fuck, like I don't know. But I did manage to find 3.
Okay.
So, but I watched and I actually really enjoyed Kingsman.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that one I really liked. The Tenant, which is a newer one that came out in 2020. So that one's a Christopher Nolan film, which
Yep.
I had to watch a couple of times in order to like really understand it.
I think we've all just finished watching it, or we're about to start watching it because of how the time inversion works. But
Yeah.
we're
Yeah,
all
it was
somewhere on the
wild.
scale of Tenet.
Yes.
Scott and I revisited Tenet for an episode, and it was I think our second time watching it. I think second,
Or
maybe your
or
third,
first.
or
Who
first. Who
knows?
knows? Yeah. But I remember a lot of that episode was us working through trying to understand Tenet over the course of the episode.
Yeah. When I first watched it, I was like, what the fuck am I watching? Like, I don't understand. But then after a while, I was just like, oh wow, like this really goes like now that you start like putting the pieces of the puzzle together and like are actually starting to understand it closer to the end of the film.
Mm-hmm.
So, and then I will say I have to, this is like a guilty pleasure and I'm probably going to get laughed at for this, but Austin Powers.
No,
Hey,
you're not
no
gonna get laughed
shame.
at.
No shame. No, I love it. Austin Powers is great.
So,
Great
yeah,
fun.
yeah. Except for the third one, I'm not really a fan of Goldmember.
I'm with you.
So
Yeah, it's kind of the weakest of the bunch, I think. We haven't touched them on the show yet, but yeah.
yeah, I think it's because Beyonce is not a good actor at all. She just can't act for the life of her. So yeah, but yeah.
But you'll always
So-
have the gold member jokes. They're pretty
Absolutely,
classic.
yeah, and him eating his skin, his dead skin,
Oh,
and everything like
I've
that.
forgotten about that. Oh.
Austin Powers is one of those things, though. It's like people sometimes feel guilty mentioning them as favorites, but they were so important to how the genre evolved over that decade onwards.
Mhm.
Like they were changing the genre because they didn't want to fall into those Austin Powers traps.
Yeah. It was great. I always enjoy watching those. So
I'm looking forward to going back to them at some point. I've got a story about the second one I've been saving and teasing people for years now. So we'll get there eventually, and you will learn the
Okay.
story. But we've been dancing around it, folks. I think we should talk about this week's film. Cam, what do we got?
Yes, we are talking about 1995's Ghost in the Shell.
Ooh.
Now, this is our first anime. We've had a couple of firsts recently. We had our first foreign language film a few weeks ago with Black Book, the Paul Verhoeven film, which was a smash hit for us. So we thought we'd do another first with the first animated feature. And there are quite a few animated spy films that we will get to. There's things from like Spies in Disguise, Cars 2. It's kind of a wide spectrum of types of different sorts of animation, I would say. But I'm glad we're starting here. But for those who aren't familiar, here is your letterboxd.com synopsis. Ghost in the Shell. It found a voice. Now it needs a body. In the year 2029, the barriers of our world have been broken down by the net and by cybernetics. But this brings new vulnerability to humans in the form of brain hacking. when a highly wanted hacker known as the Puppet Master begins involving them in politics, Section 9, a group of cybernetically enhanced cops, are called in to investigate and stop the Puppet Master.
Boom, boom, boom.
Yeah, that's a good ending like that, wasn't it? Yeah, I like that. Well, throwing out to the group, Danny, you first. What was your first experience with Ghost in the Shell?
To be honest, I actually don't remember exactly. I know I watched this film really later on in my adult life. I never really watched it when I was a kid or anything. So watching it as an adult, it was a little confusing. It definitely doesn't answer a lot of the questions that you have when you first watch it initially. So it can be a little confusing and will leave you a little lackluster, kind of. At least that's how I felt. I don't know how you guys felt it when you first watched it. So but yeah, I mean, I definitely have to watch it a couple of times before I could actually really appreciate the film, because this film is actually a staple in the anime community and everything.
Yeah, I've read some mixed thoughts on that, but maybe we'll get to that in a bit. But for me, this was something I didn't pick up in 1995, but I think maybe 98, 99 when it was available for home release. It's something we definitely had rented from the video store. And watched. I think that was basically it. But at this point, we were between watching Dragon Ball Z or my brother's collecting Pokemon cards. It was a lot of anime in the house. So when I saw this a blockbuster, I'm like, yeah, let's watch this. And it just, I remember being blown away by the visuals, but I remember going, this isn't as fast paced as like Dragon Ball Z.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it doesn't really show and tell you. Like they don't actually tell you on what's going on. You kind of have to like put the pieces together a little bit. So some people can love it and then some people can hate it. So it's like both sides of the coin. It's a double-edged sword, really.
Yeah, so. But what about you, Cam? I mistakenly told Danny early on that you'd never seen it, but apparently you have.
Yeah, so like as a film buff, like I try to delve into kind of every aspect of film, and anime was one that I always felt was lacking, and it was also very intimidating, where you'd kind of look out there and be like, I don't even know where to start. And I remember in the post Matrix era, they would talk so much about the movies that inspired the Matrix, and that's when you'd kind of go, okay, I'm starting to hear names. Some of these names are starting to recur. I mentioned Siskel and Ebert. I remember them. I can't remember if it was Siskel and Ebert or Ebert and Roper at that point. It might have been Ebert and Roper, but bringing up Ghost in the Shell and talking about it. And it was a little bit further down the road in the 2000s, probably around the mid 2000s. They used to do this thing at my local theater called the Digital Film Fest, where for 2 slower weeks of the year, they would play, greatest hits. You'd see things like Jurassic Park, the Indiana Jones series, all that sort of stuff. But they did a night where they were programming back-to-back Akira and Ghost in the Shell. And so I made the effort and said, okay, I mean, not only do I get to see 2 movies I've heard referenced over and over again, but also on the big screen. And so I went and watched a double feature of both of them. And I really did enjoy both of them. But it was a case, like, I haven't watched that many anime since. Like, I've watched Studio Ghibli stuff. I've watched a handful. But I've always felt like there's so many titles, I'm never quite sure what I should be watching. Danny, I need to be, like, just getting you to send me recommendations, because I would be totally game. But it's always like, it's kind of like with Bollywood. Like, I know there's so many important Bollywood films I should be watching, but I'm never quite sure which ones.
Yeah. I will say, anime is definitely a lot easier to get into than, like, say, Marvel comics or DC comics or anything like that. Because with anime, especially when it comes to, like, manga per se, there is just going to be one volume. Like, there isn't going to be all, like, these different types of stories that revolve around, like, Batman or something, because Batman has, like, 50 billion different types of like, I guess, universes and stuff like that, where anime is just, oh, you want to read this? Okay, here's volume 1. Like, and it's the same thing with anime. It's just, oh, you want to watch this? Okay, start with this one and
Right.
then go on.
I did have a quick question, actually. Everyone's first experience, was it with the English dub or with the subtitles?
Mine was English. So I typically, over at my podcast, I'm typically more dub versus sub. So I favor more so the dub over subtitles. Sometimes it depends. I definitely evolved and started watching more subs over the years. So, but this movie in particular, I did watch it in English. So, and it's actually pretty solid. I've watched a few clips of Ghost in the Shell on YouTube in Japanese, and I mean, it's still, whichever you go with, you're still going to get a good film.
And you can?
I'm pretty sure that I saw a dubbed version, especially if they're showing it very mainstream audience kind of thing. I'm thinking they would have done back-to-back dubbed versions of both Akira and Ghost in the Shell. That's the best of my memory.
They probably did do English back then, especially because, not a lot of people were really into foreign films and all that kind of stuff. So I'm very highly pretty sure that they did English.
Yeah,
So.
and I did watch the subtitled for the rewatch, and it was actually an interesting comparison in terms of following the plot.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah.
yeah. I mean, like that's the beauty of sub versus dub. Like sometimes watching it in sub can definitely give you a better understanding of the movie, or whereas, sometimes there are certain shows or movies that are better in English. I know for me, there are a couple of shows that I just cannot watch it in Japanese because whether there's just too much text on the screen, and I'm the type of person that's all like, oh, wait, pause. I want to read everything that is on the screen before I move on so I know what's going on.
I can't watch Dragon Ball Z or Dragon Ball Super or anything like that.
Oh, Dragon Ball Z is trash in Japanese.
I can't watch it in Japanese. I have to watch the dub. Yeah, exactly. I just can't do it. I've tried.
It's terrible. I'm sorry. I don't need Goku yelling and screaming like an old lady. So, yeah.
You understand my pain. But the reason I mention it is twofold, actually, because I went to, because they had the 25th anniversary of this a couple of years back, but because of COVID, they delayed the screenings. They showed them in theaters. And I caught this again last year, and I actually got to see it in Japanese for the first time on the big screen, which was actually quite an interesting experience. But I had seen it a couple of times in English before that, so I've definitely seen both. But also this week we have a Spy Master interview coming later this week with Mary Claypool, who actually wrote the dubbing.
Oh, nice.
Film.
Oh, cool.
She wrote the script.
Sweet.
So,
nice.
Yeah, we're chatting with her about the whole experience, and she's actually done all of the Ghost in the Shell films since.
Cool. I did not know that. That's awesome.
Yeah, so tune in on Friday for that.
Sweet.
But I think between the three of us, well, actually, I'll exclude myself. Between the two experts in the room, let's talk about how this... Okay.
There's one expert, let's be honest.
I tell you what, Cam, you introduce the section, and Danny takes over for the rest of it. How did we get Ghost in the Shell?
Yes, so this was based on a 1989 manga series written and illustrated by Masamune Shirow. And I would just like to know, Danny, had you read the initial manga?
I did not. I'm going to tell you right now. I did not. So.
Okay.
I'm sure it's good, but I did not.
And like, have you read any of the works of the writer illustrator?
No. I mean I've watched a little bit of Appleseed, but Appleseed isn't really up my alley. So, yeah, no, I'm gonna say no.
Okay, fair enough. And so they were looking to adapt this, and director Mamoru Oshii had gotten his start in the late 70s. He'd actually gotten his start on a anime show called Jetter Mars, and one of the episodes he directed two for that series, but one of them was called Secret Intelligence Agent Jam Bond. So,
Ooh.
Scott, we should dig that up.
Jam Bond. That sounds like a band.
Mm-hmm. But he had also, worked on shows like Gatchaman 2 and done several films. And the film era really started in 1982. And he had gone in wanting to direct a project called Jin-Roh, The Wolf Brigade. And he had met with Bandai Visual, and they actually wanted him to do Ghost in the Shell. And so that was how that came to be. He did make, I believe, The Wolf Brigade later on. Is that correct, Danny?
He was the original creator, and he also wrote the script for it. So, but they actually did end up making it. They made it in 1999. So, yeah, that's actually a really good film,
Okay.
and I highly recommend it.
Cool. And he had said of the Ghost in the Shell property, like apparently it was very popular among animators at the time.
Oh yeah,
And
yeah.
yeah,
He's Mamoru Oshii is definitely a huge, you could say, legend
mhm.
in the anime community, and a lot of the animators definitely wanted him to do a lot of projects and stuff. So
Yeah.
If we're gonna contextualize his work, then if he's one of the big fish at that point, are we talking like he's a Spielberg in that sort of realm,
mm,
or is he more like artsy? Is he like a Cronenberg?
I would say he's definitely more artsy versus like
mainstream.
like Miyazaki. Like, yeah, he's definitely no Miyazaki for sure. I would say Oshii-san, he's more so like behind the scenes. He doesn't really provide or do a whole lot. Like, he kind of keeps him to himself a little bit, and he's very, I would say, he can be a little particulate with the projects that he wants to do, really. So
Sounds more like a Tarantino.
yeah, you could say that. He's done in the recently, like a lot of his staff stuff that he's done. He's done a couple of scripts for a couple of episodes in Lupin the Third, Part 6. He was the original creator for Vlad Love, which that came out fairly recently. So, I mean, he's still active and he's still doing a lot of projects and stuff. So, but he doesn't really do a whole lot of like interviews, and like I said, he's no Miyazaki or I can't think of anyone else who's like super popular at the moment.
No, that's fine.
Yeah, it was interesting. I was actually just reading some anniversary pieces on Ghost in the Shell where they'd done interviews with him, mostly via email. But
Yeah.
they were very like kind of short and to the point. Like he wasn't someone who clearly wanted to dive deep into the whole process. He had a great quote though about just the Ghost in the Shell property where he said, "I figured it would eventually be animated and that I would likely end up directing the animated adaptation."
Yes.
It's like,
yes.
okay, fair enough.
Yeah, he directed and he did the storyboarding, and Ghost in the Shell also ended up being another film, which was Ghost in the Shell 2, and it also led to Ghost in the Shell 2.0, and then the series, which is Ghost in the Shell Standalone Complex, which a lot of people in the community think that the show is a lot better than the movies.
Interesting.
I have heard this actually. I did just want to say about the director. You should always be your own biggest fan. So credit to him for saying he was going to do it. I appreciate that. A man after my own heart. Short emails, and I like myself.
Yeah,
that's the way to be. But I had heard that like people think the actual anime show is a much better translation than this film.
Yeah, it just deep dives a little bit more, and you get a little bit more of understanding of the major and everything, and where the major comes from, and all that kind of stuff. So
But Cam, please continue.
Yeah, so he was working on Ghost in the Shell with writer Kazunori Ito, who had gotten a start in the early 80s. One of his early efforts was, I believe, uncredited work on Studio Ghibli's Nausicaa of the Valley of the Wind. And
that one's also a good movie.
Yeah, that's one. That's an outstanding one I need to watch. That one is on my to watch list.
We did a review on that actually. So.
And yeah, so he went on and wrote 50 episodes of the series Urusei Yatsura from 82 to 84. And also that was also a series that Mamoru Oshii was directing. So I'm guessing that's sort of where the relationship started, because they would go on and do several projects together, including Twilight Q and also a live action film called Red Spectacles. So it made sense for them as collaborators to roll into Ghost in the Shell.
Yeah.
Was Tom Hanks in that?
In Red Spectacles?
Yeah. Just continuing the red themed clothing.
Oh,
so.
right. Good point. Yeah, not that I know of.
Okay.
Not that I know of.
Right. That joke did not land, everyone. That joke did not land.
And just the visual look was something that was quite groundbreaking at the time. It was created through the use of digitally generated animation and a combo of cell animation, computer graphics, and audio. And it was referred to as, I believe, DGA. And it was like audio that was achieved and entered as digital data, which I feel like nowadays is probably much more common, but at the time was very groundbreaking.
It didn't feel like I'd seen anything like it in anime when I first saw this film.
Yeah, and I do feel like that's something that Ebert was saying when he was reviewing it as well in the 90s.
It's definitely groundbreaking, and it's definitely a stepping stone for animation, because I mean, you have Akira, which literally Akira saved the anime industry, and then you have Ghost in the Shell, where it breaks barriers, and it also uses a little bit of CGI, and it also uses a lot of cell work. So
was that somewhat sort of taboo at the time, using CG and things like that? Because you think of like Dylan when he first picked up an electric guitar and people are shouting at him because he's not playing an acoustic anymore. Is it that kind of thing?
In Japanese animation, even though Japan has like they're miles ahead of anybody when it comes to technology, but their CG animation is pure trash. Like it's
interesting.
It's just they don't understand it. It's definitely no Pixar or anything like that. It can be a little bit of an eyesore. However, over the years, so like a lot of anime today, there are some anime studios that strictly do CG animation, and it's actually fairly decent and you can rarely tell that it's CG and stuff. So like Studio Orange, for example, is purely CG animation, and when you watch something from them, you can tell, but it's still easy on the eyes.
Right. And I tend to prefer hand-drawn animation. I just find it like more beautiful to look at.
A lot of people do.
Yeah.
I mean, when Disney decided to go to the 3D, the CG route, I was just all like, but hand-drawn animation is so pretty. Why you gotta go this way?
What was Disney's last one? Was it Princess and the Frog?
The Princess and the Frog was their very last animated film.
Yeah.
And then they just went on with CG. Which isn't bad.
No, it's not bad. They did a Winnie the Pooh one, I think, in 2011, but it was not a major release. It was not a Princess and the Frog.
I mean, Winnie the Pooh. I love Winnie the Pooh, but let's face it, Winnie the Pooh just goes straight to DVD. So
yeah. And I guess I'll just mention Disney did start incorporating CG in, I think, 1986 with The Great Mouse Detective. Where they were doing like the bells of a church in CG.
And that is my all-time favorite underrated Disney movie.
Okay.
I love that movie.
Yeah, no, it's very good.
I'll stick to Robin Hood.
Pretty great.
That's always my go-to.
Robin Hood was good, but come on, Vincent Price as Ratigan, come on. And he sings. Like you can't go wrong with that.
Isn't Vincent Price Dr. Goldfoot?
He is, yes.
Oh, okay.
Yes.
We'll be talking about Dr. Goldfoot quite soon, I think, actually. So we'll have a Vincent Price appearance.
That's right. So the financials on this movie are to be taken with a grain of salt, honestly, because the thing is, like, it cost $2.5 million. That was its budget. But when you're talking about how much it actually earned, it was direct to DVD. A lot of places, a lot of other markets, it was very limited screenings before it went to DVD. So like, I don't really take much of the box office information that seriously on this one because it was quite successful in the long haul in terms of DVD sales. But for domestic numbers, so for like North America, I have $889,000, and then international, $30 million. So sorry, no, correct that. Sorry, $30,000.
I was going to say, it did really well for itself for a second there, and
Yeah.
you stole it away.
Yeah, so like again, like if it's playing select screenings in more boutique theaters, that kind of makes sense, and for a very limited run, because when you look up the DVD release dates, especially in like North America, very shortly after those theatrical windows.
That makes sense. Despite I had read in my research that this was pitched almost as like a, to try and break through barriers overseas. This to be the first one to actually go into theaters, or more than just a couple of showings. But I don't remember this ever being publicized here. I don't remember ever seeing a poster for it in the UK.
Yeah, I mean, that Siskel and Ebert review would have been my awareness that this was something that was playing in theaters. There was not like ads in my newspaper or anything like that. And it is notable. Like I found that they said, in terms of DVD grosses, it did 43 million. So like this thing was a huge success story, just in terms of when you're measuring it the way we so often do on the show, at looking at box office. It doesn't really apply to this movie.
I imagine a lot of people were in your position, Cam, where they're like, I don't know how to start this. Is this where I go? Is this how I do it? I don't know. And so you would then wait until it comes out on home rentals, and you'd pick it up that way.
Yeah. And also, like, I would imagine it probably played in my neck of the woods, maybe, but it would have been one art house theater in downtown Vancouver. And so, like, if you lived in the suburbs, that's many miles away if you're quite young.
Anime hasn't gotten mainstream until 2010. Like, anime was definitely still like the underdog, quote unquote normal people, like celebrities and shit like that. Like no one was vocal about watching anime and stuff like that. And I mean, a lot of people don't even realize that a lot of Hollywood movies are inspired by anime as well. Black Swan was inspired by Perfect Blue, for example. Inception was inspired by Paprika. So there are numerous of anime that has inspired Hollywood films. So
including this one.
Absolutely, yeah. This one inspired The Matrix, so...
Yeah, I've got a little bit about that the Wachowskis showed the film to producer Joel Silver as an example of what they hoped to achieve when they were trying to get him to make The Matrix. So they were basically like, watch this, that's what we're going to do.
Yeah.
I mean, you can...
And they did a great job.
Yeah, you can actually like point at scenes and be like, that's in The Matrix. They've basically taken these
so
bits.
like a couple of key points that that the Matrix has is the kind of little device that they put behind their neck, and you see Makoto pulling wires behind her neck and everything like that. So that is definitely one key point on what Ghost in the Shell inspired the Matrix to do. And I can't remember a lot of the other things that they kind of inspired to do.
Well, like there's like the slow motion stuff.
Oh yeah,
there's a lot of that.
Yeah.
Bullet time, as they'll call it. But yeah, sorry, go on, Cam.
But just to wrap it up, basically, the top three for this year: number one was Toy Story, so there's a obviously big animated film. Number two was Apollo 13. Number three was Batman Forever, and also notable, you had at number 6 GoldenEye, and number 163 the spy film Bad Company. And yeah, just to wrap it up, Mamoru Oshii returned for Ghost in the Shell 2 Innocence, but not the writer. They actually, I guess, split apart for that one. And then also there was the revised version, which Dannie referenced, the Ghost in the Shell 2.0. And I'd like to ask her a question about that in a second. But that film was intended to reflect, I think, changes in perspective on the material. So that kind of wraps up the behind the scenes. But I would like to know, Dannie, in terms of Ghost in the Shell 2.0, is it drastic differences?
I never watched it.
Okay, fair enough. Fair enough. Is it like considered like a?
Yes.
Is it considered like an important version of the movie, or is it kind of more of a
No.
novelty one?
It's just a novelty. It's from what I heard, it's kind of more of a rendition. So here, I'm actually going to read something. When Oshii went back to making changes to the original Ghost in the Shell, to re-release it as Ghost in the Shell 2.0, one of the reasons he gave was that the film did not resemble the sequel. He wanted to update the film to reflect changes in perspective.
Right.
So it's pretty much the same film, except he just made a couple of changes.
Okay, fair enough.
So,
And have you watched the sequel?
I did not.
Yeah.
I heard. I did not really hear good things about it, and the sequel isn't really necessary.
Mm-hmm.
Especially in the anime community. I'm sure it's good. Mamoru Oshii tends to. You can even see in the sequel's poster cover. There's a basset hound, and I believe. I could be wrong about this fact, but I believe Mamoru Oshii is very, like, he loves his basset hounds, and almost all his movies, he kind of puts in a basset hound. In this movie, Ghost in the Shell, there is a basset hound in the movie. So, and apparently he has, like, dozens of basset hounds.
I know the art style in 2.0. Oh, no, sorry, in 2.0. In Innocence changes as well. Like, it's not the same type of animation, so it does it's quite jarring when you watch them back to back.
Yeah. Like I said, I never even watched that either because I heard that you don't really need to watch it and stuff.
Yeah.
People in the community just tend to watch Ghost in the Shell, and then they just go straight to Standalone Complex.
And we won't be covering any of the sequels but on the show, but we will be covering the remake.
Oh no. Oh no.
And Danny will be back for that. See you then,
No,
Danny.
I won't. No, I won't.
It'll just be a full commentary of her by herself, and we'll release that.
Oh man, I haven't even seen ScarJo. Like, no, I have not. I have not watched it yet.
Oh, okay, you could be changed, but we will cross that bridge when we get to it. Cam, do you have any more for us?
Nope, that wraps me up.
All right, we're here. Let's talk about it. Ghost in the Shell, 1995. Danny, what do you think about this film? Looking back on it now, how does it stand for you?
Well, I definitely have a little bit more of an understanding about it now. Like I said in the beginning of today's episode, I had a little bit of difficulty following it, because they don't really explain a whole lot of things. So the only thing that they typically explain your ghost is the form of human subconscious and stuff like that. So that was, you're just like, what is ghost? Like, I have no idea what ghost means. And the more that you watch it and the more that you realize what Makoto is talking about and all of her, trying to kind of like wondering and where she actually came from and everything like that is definitely very confusing when you watch it for the first time. So, but second time around, got to a little bit of an understanding on who Makoto was, or is. Not only that, the show Standalone Complex also helps you a little bit in the understanding of what Ghost is and what Ghost in the Shell is about and stuff. So, but yeah, I mean, I always love watching this movie. The music in particular is, I'm a fan favorite of it. So, and it really, it's very subtle, but also it can be also very eerie all at the same time, because you're seeing the movie in Makoto's eyes, and she's also kind of like doubting herself because of the puppet master when she meets the puppet master. And she even asks Bato, like, is the puppet master and me like alike? And Bato is all like, well, what do you mean? You look nothing alike. And Makoto is just saying, no, I meant like personality per se, like, are we alike? And so, it's enjoyable to see the doubt and the journey that Makoto has, because when you first meet Makoto, she is definitely deadpan face, rarely even blinks at all throughout the entire film, because she may portray a human, but she's really a cyborg. So, and she just has no feeling and everything like that. So it's very interesting to see, somebody who potentially could be not human at all, like she said in the film, like, I feel like I was a person, but I died and they just put my brain in this body. So you even have a little bit of sympathy for Makoto and everything like that when it comes to that kind of aspect.
I'm going to stop us for a second because I'm confused. Is it Motoko or Makoto?
Motoko.
Okay.
I probably mixed it up a little bit.
It's okay. I'd rather stop us and get it right now, moving forward, so we don't get it wrong further.
Motoko. Yeah, Motoko.
The expert has been dethroned.
That's okay. On my podcast, I do a lot of mixing up words, and the Anime Summit community calls them Dannieisms.
Ah, okay.
There we are.
So, like with cinematography, I say cinematography.
I like it. Sounds delicious.
It's very sweet. I like it. Yeah.
Yeah. So enjoy the Dannieisms.
We've had our first Dannieism, everyone. So there we go. Motoko, Makoto, I don't mind. You're the major to me. That's fine.
Yeah, literally, you could just call her the major. It's fine.
But you're definitely right, though. I mean, this film, I think if you're watching it as a kid for the first time, you're not going to get anything that's going on.
Oh, absolutely not. A 12-year-old is not going to understand, or at least, like, I would think a 12-year-old would not understand this movie.
You'd watch it and enjoy the action sequences and some of the spectacles. Absolutely. That looks great. But the metaphor that's buried into this.
Yeah. Everything that goes behind it and everything, it's over the head. So.
But what about you, Cam? What do you think?
I just think visually this movie is arresting. It's the sort of thing where I was so sucked into the visuals on this, go around with it. The creation of like its city, Newport City, is like the kind of place you see in movies like, Gotham in Batman, or like the city in Blade Runner. It just has this unbelievable vibe and atmosphere that really can't be underrated. Like, I think anyone who is into just visual design needs to watch this movie. From a plot point, I actually found this, because I watched it subtitled this time, I found the subtitles very difficult because there is a lot of explanation and those subtitles change real fast. So let me tell you, taking notes and following those subtitles may have been the most difficult thing I've ever done for this podcast.
We're stretching you,
and you're not the anime person, and you watched it in sub. Congrats.
I watch a lot of subtitled movies, so it's not like I'm intimidated by subtitles, but the ones here were moving so fast that I was like, oh my God.
I will tell you, Japanese subtitles are honestly like the top difficulty of foreign subtitles ever.
I can believe it.
I'm going to like, there are numerous of shows where I just literally put my hands on my face. I'm like, I can't watch this. I don't know what the hell's going on here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I would just say, like, Cam, it sounds like you're enjoying this film's cinematography.
I was enjoying it, yes. But it was interesting because, like, I watch like a lot of Kurosawa films and Ozu films that go back to the past, but they're more slower paced films. Whereas like this is 80 minutes and it moves at a clip. And so the subtitles, people talk quickly. So the subtitles are moving quickly. And to add insult to injury for me, the subtitles weren't just at the bottom of the screen; they would alternate top and bottom.
On the top, yeah, because there would be some stuff that would, like, they'll show like a poster or a billboard and it's all in Japanese and they want to show you the translation of what that poster or billboard is.
Yep.
So yeah, that's what I mean by like, wait, pause. I have to pause the movie. I need to read what's on top. I need to read what's on the side, and I need to also read what's on the bottom.
Just imagine what it was like for me and my brother sitting in the cinema watching this, not knowing we were going into the subbed version, and I mean, like, not being prepared for it, and then I mean, we were the only two people there.
Right.
Unfortunately, that's where the meme photo
I
of
wouldn't
me.
call that unfortunately. At least in my opinion, I wouldn't call that unfortunately.
I think more people should be watching this film. I think that you should be enjoying it. I liked having to myself. You're right, actually. Sort everyone else. Get out of my theaters, you dirty people. Yeah, you're all gross. Wash your hands.
But what this film I think does beautifully though is, like, at first my notes are just like a fever dream of me trying to keep track of plot points. And then it was like I just kind of gave up and I said, you know what? I'm not going to worry about that. And
just
I think
enjoy the movie.
Exactly. Like, as an experience, I think it really just sucked me in. And I think this movie does something for me that the original Mission Impossible did when I was a teenager, where Mission Impossible back in 1996, that movie was considered very confusing. I don't think that's so much the case now when you watch it. I think it's actually, we've been brought up just in terms of convoluted plots. We now watch that one and see it as very straightforward. But at the time, people were very confused by that movie. And as a teenager, I loved watching it, even though I couldn't quite figure it out. And I would actually rewatch it over and over, trying to just connect all the dots, because I just loved the atmosphere and the set pieces and the characters. And I think that's kind of the case here, where, like, I didn't feel when we got to the end, I understood what the story was about. It was more a moment-to-moment confusion, but it's the sort of thing that, because I was so invested in all the set pieces and the animation and the atmosphere and the characters, that the plot became secondary, where I got the bigger picture, but I would feel compelled to go back later and nail down the little points. But they aren't necessary. Like, the movie, your enjoyment is not going to hinge on whether you picked up every little bit of dialogue from, like, you know, the Section 6 guy.
Right.
And I think, if we're looking at the sub versus dubbed debate on this one, I think dubbed is the way to go. Just because you could sit back and enjoy the spectacle that you're watching on the screen and not have to worry about darting your eyes around to look at words.
Yes. Yeah. This movie is definitely a more, especially if you're not,
well versed.
Yeah, you could say well versed. Or if you don't know Japanese,
fluent. Yeah.
You're better off watching it in English so you can enjoy the cinematography and the animation and everything like that. And then, definitely, like, what you should really do is, watch it the second time and maybe watch it in sub so that you can, I guess, maybe get a little bit of an understanding, because sometimes reading it also can give you a better aspect of what the movie is and everything. So,
but I know what you mean, Cam, about sort of just. Funny that actually Danny mentioned Tenet, because it don't try to understand it, just feel it. That line from the film, it kind of works with this too. You don't really need to dive. I mean, there's a lot to dive into when it comes to the underlying, all these different allegories and stuff in the back of this film. It's great, but as an experience, an 80-minute film, just sit back and watch it. I don't think you need to overanalyze. As for me, I still enjoy it. I think I enjoy it a lot more as an adult, being able to pick apart the themes and really dive into some of the talking points this film actually likes to look at. Some really fascinating stuff. And there's an article that I'm going to get Cam to link, and I'll talk about that in a bit in the show notes below. But just as like a broad thing, this is a game changer when it comes to anime. There's a reason why we chose this as our first anime. There's a reason why people who listen, I imagine, who are listeners to the Anime Summit podcast, have come over to hear this, that still talk about this film and still reference this film, because it was that pivotal moment, and it still holds up now. Mm-hmm. They did something right.
Absolutely. Even though this movie came out in 1995, it still it's still beautiful to look at. You know, the story is so great to you know, dive in and everything. It aged very well over the years.
We mentioned Spielberg earlier. You look at something like Jurassic Park. That still looks terrific.
Oh yeah, for sure, absolutely.
And this is exactly the same for me. And you know, we're a spy movie podcast, and we're talking about an anime film that isn't, you know, it's not about men in tuxedos drinking martinis. It's not exactly in. You might not look at this film and instantly go, "Oh, that's a spy film," but really, there is a ton of layers of spy work in this film, and we're going to explore some more of that in the interview later this week, actually, with Mary. But you know, there's a lot you can really look at it from when it comes to like ghosts are like people. Because I wrote this down very early in my notes, but James Bond is a ghost. And the shell is Lazenby, Roger Moore, Sean Connery. And it can just flow like that. The same with, I guess, the Mission Impossible thing. Like, Phelps has been played by two different people. It's the same thing. You could... I think it's really quite applicable. So I'm quite glad we stuck with this as the first one. But, you know, my overall thought is, I'm glad I saw it in the cinema. I'm glad I rewatched it. I'm glad I picked up the 4K for this viewing. It's a stunning film, and I will continue to rewatch it.
And it's actually aged incredibly well just in terms of its animation, because it is that blend of hand-drawn with CG, but it's not putting all of the weight on the CG. Like when you go back, and I mentioned Toy Story was the #1 grossing movie of this particular year. You go back and watch like Toy Story, you know, A Bug's Life, some of those early Pixars, like the CG animation has started to show its seams. Whereas when I watch Ghost in the Shell, I wouldn't really say that's the case. It feels kind of timeless because it's such a unique kind of visual look.
Well, it's predominantly hand drawn. It's a lot of cell work per se. So, you know, you can't really tell where the CG is. Like, I will tell you right now, anytime I watch it, I can't, like, you're not seeing me with like my magnifying glass on the screen. It's like, oh, there's the CG. I see it. Like, you can't tell where it is. So, nor are you really kind of like looking for it per se. So,
well, let's look at some individual aspects that we liked about the film. So Danny, you first. What's something you liked about the film? A section, a person, a character? What would you like to mention?
Well, the major Motoko, she is she is definitely my like. She's my favorite because #1, you don't see too many female protagonists.
Yeah.
Particularly in spy movies, since this is a spy podcast. So you don't really see too many leading female spies per se. And Motoko, she is definitely that strong-willed kind of, she wants to figure out, you know, what the puppet master really wants and all that kind of stuff. So and she, in the very beginning of the film is so important. And honestly, the beginning of the film, the first, like, I want to say maybe like 10 to 15, 20 minutes of the film is like the most iconic scene in the film when it comes to her taking off her like trench coat, whatever, to reveal her skin tight looking nude spy outfit, and then her kind of just like turning and falling off the building, and then her going into that building to kill one of the political diplomat people, and she runs out of the window, and she's falling, and she's just looking up at the guys, and she just puts her face over her puts her hand over her face to reveal that like she's like her special suit can make her invisible and everything like that. So
yeah, I was going to say, Cam, I didn't need you to wear that skin tight suit for the recording. Thank you.
I didn't actually know we were doing this movie. I just was wearing it anyway.
Another iconic moment in the film is the fight scene that Motoko has when she's in her invisible suit with the guy, and they're in like kind of like that pond looking area. It's like, I mean, it's not a deep kind of pond, but like they're definitely in water, and the fact that the guy is like, he doesn't know where Motoko is, and like he's kind of like fighting air, and there are a couple moments where Motoko does like a sweep kick underneath his feet and everything, and that whole scene is just super iconic and very well animated. It's definitely one of my favorites.
Well, yeah, the Major is she's our protagonist, and you're right. There are not enough female leads in spy movies or films, period. And we've encountered this problem numerous times in the podcast. So it's nice to see a well-written female lead. So bravo to that. We were doing it in '95. We should be doing it now. And yeah, you can point out lots of really cool sequences, like the one at the start there. Also, when she's fighting the tank at the end and like rips herself in half just to try and get to it. But I for me, what I find fascinating about her on this rewatch is just the question she brings up about what is a person, what is consciousness. Yeah, I always go back to the broom problem. I've heard it referred to online as, but like a broom has a stick and a head, okay? And as you use a broom, your head will wear out, so you put a new head on it, and then as you're using it, the stick will break, so you'll put a new stick in it. Now, is that the broom that you started with, or is that a new broom? Because it's still your broom.
Right.
So what broom is it? And she is, by this point, almost completely cybernetic. She's a cyborg, so she has some human components in there, but I think she's like over 99% cybernetic at this point. And she doesn't even know if she was a person that died or if she's completely fake memories. But she has every right to have these feelings and to go through this process. And the film is about her like discovery of that and her molding with another AI.
Yeah. The beauty of seeing Motoko doubting like her quote unquote humanity, especially when she's interacting with Bateau. One scene in particular that I can definitely remember, aside from her asking Bateau, is the puppet master and me alike, is another scene where she goes out diving on a boat. And she's just in the water, and of course you see that beautiful when she's floating up to the surface, and you can see that it's her, and then also there's a reflection of her as well, and that's also kind of like your theme and representation of like who is the real Motoko kind of thing. And then once she gets on the boat, Bateau is on the boat and saying, aren't you afraid that you're gonna sink and everything like that? Like how was your diet? Like how was swimming? What was swimming like and everything? And she says it. She's like, I had a sense of fear. I had anxiety. I think she says something else, but I can't remember what else she says. But she has those feelings. So there is a small sense that Motoko has some sort of humanity in her because she's feeling those things when she goes diving and everything like that. And also she's still kind of not human. Like she doesn't really have, human aneurysms, especially when she's undressing, because there are some key points where during when she was on the boat, she took off her diving suit and it panned to another frame where Bateau was looking, but then he had the need to kind of look away in a sense of respect for Motoko to undress in privately kind of. And then there's another scene in the beginning where she was finished fighting off that guy, and she still had like that skin tight, bare, like kind of nude looking suit, and Bateau just so happened to have the need for him to put a coat around her to cover herself. Yeah. So
it's interesting. You look at that scene where she's coming up to the surface when she's out on the boat. And I always took that as like a mirror image of when she's being created in the credits.
Yes, yeah.
And her being born, she's trying to rebirth herself to be something else. And I like that. And I sent this article to Cam a couple months ago, and we were talking about doing this film by Willow McClay over on RogerEbert.com. and she's a trans woman, and talking about sort of the identity issues that she went through and the identity issues that Motoko is dealing with in this film. And I think it's such a fascinating article. I think everyone should go check it out. We'll put it in the show notes below. But what's crazy is this is also an 80-minute film, and it packs this philosophical punch, several philosophical punches, whilst also being a kick-ass action film at the same time. And no, me and Cam have sat through 3-hour films for this podcast that have not done anything.
Right.
Which is crazy. But Cam, what about you? Something you liked?
Well, you just underlined it right there. It's the balance of these philosophical concepts with being an action film and delivering on both fronts. You can look at a movie like Blade Runner, which I don't know how much they were looking at Blade Runner when they were, adapting this. I really don't know, but you can see the similarities, at least thematically, and visually. But to me, like Blade Runner is more of a philosophical movie than an action movie. Like, you don't really watch it for its action. Whereas I would say like this one does exactly what the Wachowskis succeeded with The Matrix, where they made an incredibly like crowd-pleasing, exciting movie that also has these heady concepts. So it's like you can sit through it and just be like, that was a really thrilling 90-minute movie that I enjoyed and got a lot out of. But if you want to dig deeper, there's so much there. And that scene on the boat, we were just talking about her diving and then swimming up towards hope. And it's that, rebirth of tying that all to this villain at the end who wants to essentially be reborn and have the ability to die and to procreate by merging with her at the end. It's all of these concepts that, like, if you are just a teenager looking for sensationalistic kind of thrills, this movie will give you that. But it's almost like giving you these sorts of philosophical ideas so that, like, it's kind of like inviting you in, like kind of like almost like if I was a teenager, this would have been a really good introduction to headier films, because it would give me the things that I'd be signing up for, but then saying, oh, and by the way, plug into this stuff. This is really interesting. Kind of like The Matrix did.
Was that a pun?
Sure. Yes, it was.
I guess for mine, and I think we've tackled a lot of the stuff I liked, but it's sort of a review section, but I do just want to talk about the cinematography. There's several stunning shots that I don't think I've ever seen in animation. Like, there's one right towards the end, actually, where Motoko is with the puppet master, and it does like this split shot where like the focus is on Motoko's face, and then it in like a split focus where it goes onto the puppet master's face in an animation. Whereas it's drawn. They could both be in focus. It chose to shift focus between two things. There was thought processes put into that scene. And that just blows me away. Or like there's a moment where Motoko is riding around on a boat around the town, just looking in the windows of the shops, and that fantastic soundtrack is in the background, just making it feel all moody. And they're just looking at buildings. I'm in rapture just looking at it. Like, God Lord, this is a good looking film. The 4K did help, though, to be fair.
There's a couple of montages just of the city and music playing over. Like, I could just sit and watch those on a loop. They're just so beautiful. And actually, another shot that I loved, not as tranquil, but the moment where there is the assailant with the machine gun and he's firing and the gun is actually pushing him back as he's firing. And like, that was an incredible little visual moment.
I just have to think they put a ton of effort into thinking about this, and people dismiss and still dismiss anime as not a proper form of cinema or entertainment. Oh, it's just for the geeks out there.
It's just for kids.
Yeah, just for kids.
And very North American. That's very common in North America. Yeah,
I would watch this before a lot of films we've covered on this podcast.
Yeah.
In terms of pure entertainment. I'm not talking about the knock list, but something I would reach for to watch myself. What this does in 85 minutes is insane. And I think we can't really move on to sort of dislikes without talking about the influence it has had on cinema. I mean, we spoke about the Matrix connection, which is there. I mean, you can do shot-for-shot bits where they've taken stuff in the Matrix. But they've obviously referenced their work. They've cited Ghost in the Shell. But yeah. I mean, in terms of action cinema, I think a lot of people have taken stuff from this film going forward. I think, maybe not the Bournes of the world, the sort of shaky cam action cutting, but some of the more like artsy shooters, I feel like have reference back to this. And also just things that deal with like Well, it's funny. You look at like Data in Star Trek, which I know is before this, but that whole like discuss of like what is human, that's still going on now with like Star Trek Picard. People are still talking about that sort of stuff. What Picard is now a robot apparently. I just think that this is the film that almost started that conversation.
Well, it's like you had that cyberpunk craze that was kicked off, where there was just a lot of cyberpunk fiction coming out, and it feels like this was. Danny maybe can answer this better, but I feel like this was maybe one of the first great adaptations of that to like a film medium. I don't know that there was one earlier that's jumping out, at least to me, because I'm more racking my brain for North American films. Nothing is really jumping to my mind, but I don't know if there was a lot else that was really hitting home runs with cyberpunk, because it's something even post this movie, you're seeing a lot of junk. Like I think of Johnny Mnemonic and stuff like that.
Oof. Right, yeah. With Keanu Reeves in The Matrix. There you go.
Yeah.
We interrupt this program to bring you a special report.
Calling all agents. Independent podcasting, much like the spy game, requires considerable resources, whether it's research, equipment, hosting, or of course constructing a top secret volcano lair. We're putting out the call for your support.
That's right. As you may know, we've activated the SpyHards Patreon, home of our ever-growing lineup of Agents in the Field episodes where we decode non-spy films from your favorite spy actors, and full film commentaries with more intel than a Basil exposition briefing.
Cam, what have we got in our crosshairs this month?
Our Thunderball commentary is live now, and put on your best Kevin Costner British accent, because we are tackling 1991's Robin Hood, Prince of Thieves, and it's going to be a bullseye.
And if that sounds delicious, then become a true spy hard today and join the circus at patreon.com/spyhards. But before this message self-destructs, Cam, resume the spy jinx. Let's pivot us over to dislikes, because we can't let a film go without poking fun at it just a little bit. I'm actually going to go first.
Okay.
Yeah, you guys go first.
Danny's saying this is a perfect film. Okay, fine. We're going to need one dislike from you, so we're going to come for you, don't worry. Don't get me wrong. I don't mind, but there's a lot of gratuitous shots of female bodies in this film. I just, for me, like, there's bits that are quite tasteful. I think, like, with the Major jumping off the building at the start, which is wearing that sort of camo suit, it makes sense. But in the opening credits, you just got shots of naked cyborgs. I don't know. I found that like a bit heavy-handed at times. I didn't need to see it as much. Anyone else notice that?
Well, so that beginning sequence when Motoko is quote unquote being born, that whole scene is kind of the resemblance of being born. So, and of course, when you are born into this life, you are naked. Like, you are not fully clothed when you're in the womb.
Excuse me, I came out wearing a tuxedo and drinking a martini.
Shaken, not stirred, right?
Uh-huh.
So, yeah, that whole thing. I mean, that I feel like the whole nudity aspect is, to me, I don't feel like that. I would say for people who are non-anime viewers, they would get a little taken back by of so much nudity, and I can understand, Scott, where you're coming from, where you were a little bit taken back and you could have used a little less of the nudity and stuff. However, I would say, like, Ghost in the Shell, for example, is definitely, like, that whole thing is breaking boundaries.
Mm-hmm.
And it's all like, this is just a body. But not only that, not only is this a body, but this is a cyborg body, and she doesn't really identify as a female. She doesn't even know what her identity is.
Yeah. And the reason I mentioned it is because when I was sat in that cinema with my younger brother, like, that's a weird experience to be going through.
I mean, at least you didn't watch that with your mom or a
well,
parent.
we did rent it as a family, so I think I may have.
Oh wow.
LOL.
Yeah.
Okay. I think I know I kind of agree with just a tiny bit with you, Scott. Not so much in terms of any of the showpiece moments, like the moments where they're, that stuff up front where she's diving off the building, anything like that. I think really works within the context of the character, who, as you said, doesn't really regard nudity as a thing. So it's her in action and having those moments works for me in terms of the film. But there's a couple shots where they'll have just like her in conversation and they're actually framing the camera, like cutting her head almost out of the picture and framing like, her chest up front in the frame and then the guy talking in the back. And I was like, okay, I feel like they're cropping it in a way now where it feels a little leering, but it's only those small handful of selective shots. I think when it comes to the larger picture, it works.
Well, I'll throw the question to Danny real quick. Is that something that is of the time or of the style of animation? Like, if I went and watched anime in the 90s, well, actually, I did quite a lot, and I suppose Dragon Ball had quite a bit, actually, to be fair, and Sailor Moon.
Yeah, you had freaking little Goku peeing in the freaking lake, and you literally saw his penis, so...
That's very true.
I mean, I was a big comic book reader, and you look at the way they made, well, both male and female characters look in comic books, in that era. They still do to a degree, but they've tried to clamp down on it in some ways. But they would put them in very risque costumes in comics back then.
Yeah, I mean, the human body, I would say it really depends on what you're watching. Like, there is a genre for nudity. It's called ecchi, and like you get the freaking big boobs.
One more time. Ecchi.
Ecchi.
Write that
Yeah,
down.
it's ECC. No, ECCHI. Yeah, no, there is an actual genre for that. Like, it's, you see panty shots, skirts getting lifted up, like all that kind of stuff.
Where's the dudes?
So the dudes are the ones who are gawking over the big ass boobs, and they're getting nosebleeds constantly.
I get nothing.
So.
I never get anything. Damn it.
So I mean, I wouldn't say it's a norm of anime, but it is a genre that is explored within the community and everything. So I would, to answer your question, is it a norm? I would say yes and no, because it would all depend on what you're watching.
I suppose if people are listening to this and then thinking about watching the film afterwards, I suppose I don't want to say like this is riddled with nudity, but like don't be surprised if you see like the odd nipple from time to time. That's all I'm saying. Just be prepared. But Danny, are you prepared to give us your dislike?
Oh, I mean, I don't think I dislike it. Like, I love this film. I enjoy it through and through, no matter how many times I watch it. I would say, I guess my one dislike would be the pacing and the very little detail and explanation that goes on within the movie. Because they kind of, whether you're watching a show or a movie, and this is coming from my experience of anime, American TV shows and American movies are a little bit different. So, but with Ghost in the Shell, they don't explain like who Motoko is, who Bato is. Like, they don't explain all that stuff. They just literally throw you in, and it's all like, here's this woman, she's a cyborg, she's questioning, if she's human or not, and she has to find this puppet master because she may just so happen to get answers from this puppet master. And that's pretty much all you get. Like, there are a lot of questions that go into the movie that you are left a little lackluster at the end, which is why I feel people, especially non-anime people who don't really know the concept of Ghost in the Shell, because when I was a young lassie, I knew I almost said when I was a young warthog.
Keeping up the animation theme there, that's fair.
Yeah. But when I was, in my teens and stuff, I knew of Ghost in the Shell, but I never, said, okay, I'm going to sit down and watch this movie because I know of it, but I want to know more about it, like that kind of thing. I knew of it. I just never got the chance to watch it until my early 20s. So I would say that in that aspect, like, it's definitely something that you need to watch a couple times to actually really understand what is going on in the movie.
It's strange. We're going back to Tenet again, aren't we?
This
is
are.
just like Tenet. You need to kind of watch it a couple of times.
Yeah.
Interesting because the director talked about being influenced by a lot of hard-boiled North American films.
Mm-hmm.
And when I think of old film noirs, a lot of them, the plots are incredibly complicated to the point where, frankly, you're not really going to understand them. It's more about tone and atmosphere and mood than sitting there and clamping down on plot points. But and so I think I understand why the movie functions that way, but I also completely understand anyone who watches it and is like, I was confused by what was. Yeah, I get that complaint. Yeah. As for a dislike for me, it's kind of tough because I feel like we've kind of covered them. I guess the one thing I'll note is there's the character who's like her partner, who's the I guess more quote unquote human character.
Bateau.
No, not Bateau, not the guy with the glasses. The other guy with the mullet.
Oh crap! What's his name?
Tagusa.
Tagusa, yeah.
Okay, so Tagusa, I like the character. He gets some things to do, but not enough. It feels like at a certain point, Bateau comes in, and Bateau is awesome, and just kind of takes the movie over. And obviously, the Major's the protagonist, but I'm like, I don't really understand why we introduced that character in the first place, because there's interesting things you could do with him because he is someone who is biologically more human. There's something there.
So I will say a lot of the characters that are shown in this movie have a bigger role in Standalone Complex.
Okay.
So
that's what I've heard
I can
about
understand. So I can understand why you're all like, why is this guy here? Like, I don't understand why he's here, this and that and the third. The reason why he's there is because he is part of Section 9. He's part of the team and everything like that. So they do need at least that one person who is human out of, Bateau and Motoko. So
the one thing I like about the Tagusa character is it does give us potentially one of the most interesting conversations in the entire film, which is right at the start when they're in the van going to the mission.
Yes.
And he asks the Major why I'm on your team, because I'm just a bog standard humanoid and you're all a bunch of cybernetic warriors. And she goes, well, because you need to have what's the line? I wrote it down. It's simple. Over specialize and you breed in weakness. It's slow death. That's a really interesting point, because if you look at it in that sense, you need antagonism to push you forward, to evolve, and that's what this film is about. It's about like the evolution and progressing to the next stage, because at the end you get this synthesis of the AI and the Major creating perhaps a new evolution in mankind. And it's not heavy-handed. This is all subtext we're talking about here, but you pick it up.
Yeah, I think my thing was I really loved that conversation, and I'm like, oh, like we could dive more into this, but at the same time, you're working within the confines of an 82-minute action-driven film, so I understand why he's not a larger part, but I just kind of wanted more because what they'd given me up front was really interesting.
Yeah, I actually echo both of your points. If I was going to ask another one, be asked another dislike, is I just think it's I completely get why it's 85 minutes-ish. It works perfectly, but you don't get enough of everything. It feels like it could have done another 10 minutes and still been a very good film. But I think before we go to the knock list, let's just quickly, any final notes? Danny, do you have anything left? Any notes for us?
Nope, just watch the movie. It's really fun.
No, okay, good.
It is not. Oh, I will say, it is not available for streaming on any sort of streaming site, anime streaming site at all. You will have to buy it somewhere. Just a heads
Well,
up.
that's strange. It's available here.
Yeah, I mean, it's not available like on Crunchyroll or like Hulu or anything like that. So
Strange.
I had to pay the $4.99 for iTunes.
I had the DVD, so I
Right.
didn't have to buy it.
She is the expert.
Sail the high seas, you know.
Yar har. Fiddle dee. Cam, any notes for us?
A couple things. We were just talking about this movie being very influential. When I was watching the scene of the Major diving off the roof, I'm like, I feel like this is in almost every superhero movie of the 2000s onwards. It just feels like little elements like that were picked up by that genre. Also, there was the moment where you had the character with the fingers that could like break apart and type on a keyboard really fast.
Yes.
And I was wondering, Scott, is that what Jonathan Pryce would have liked in Tomorrow Never Dies?
Delicious idea. Delicious. Can you imagine the speed he would have typed at that point? It would have been not tomorrow's news today. It would be like 3 days news away today or something like that. He would be time traveling.
That's right. And no, I think the only other thing I just had noted was just a lot of use of green in its depictions of technology, which also feels very Matrixy.
Yeah, the Matrix is stamped all over this film. Well, no, this film is stamped all over the Matrix. Yeah, that's the correct way of saying it.
What I like about something like The Matrix is, though, it did what Star Wars did originally, which was it had these things it was in love with, and the creators said, "Hey, we love these types of properties. Let's merge them with our own ideas and create something original."
Mhm.
I wish we had more of that because Star Wars did that, of course, with the Kurosawa films, and obviously the Wachowskis did that with The Matrix here. I wish we would do more of that versus, remakes and stuff like that. Like, I think it creates more interesting work.
One of the reasons we chose to do this film now is because we're going to tackle the Matrix films at some point because they do have a lot of,
Nice.
sort of the spy elements entangled into it. And I think this is a really good primer. Not just I imagine most people listening to this have seen at least the first Matrix film, but I think this really informs a lot of the Matrix. So I think you really should, if you're a Matrix fan, you should definitely check out this film.
And if you're a Matrix fan, you should also watch the Animatrix.
It's great. I love the Animatrix. Got it on Blu-ray. I have one question for everyone before we wrap up.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're all ghosts. We get to pick our shell. You can be anything you want. What do you want to be?
A talking dog.
Oh, a talking dog. Okay, so because you can have all sort of cybernetic implants and everything now. You can have super fast fingers. You just you want to be a normal dog that can talk.
Yes.
Okay.
Sure. Why not?
Yeah. No.
And that can form into a human.
Okay, so you're a transformer now.
Sure.
You're
yes.
you're an animorph. Sorry, I think that's the right one. Okay, I thought you were gonna go down like the sort of Air Bud angle and be like, I want to be really good at basketball.
No.
Golden
not too
Retriever.
big on sports.
Receiver. Golden Receiver.
That's the sequel, isn't it?
Yeah, there was World Class Pup. There was all sorts of.
No. What about you, Cam? What do you want to be?
Well, I think I want to be like the ultimate heartthrob, and if the spy genre has taught me anything, that's Jonathan Pryce, who I mentioned earlier.
But from Jumpin' Jack Flash, not from Tomorrow Never Dies. Yeah.
Yes, of course. I want like the red vest, the 80s mullet,
80s
Jonathan
mullet.
Pryce.
Absolutely.
I also would want to be able to eat whatever I want and not get fat.
They have that. That's a thing they have. So yeah, that's I'll take that too.
Well, in the movie they reference alcohol, that they can drink alcohol and basically shake it off immediately. So maybe that would be the case with food as well.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think. It's one of those things where I've asked a fun question, but I can't think of my own answer. So I'm trying to like process it now. What would I want to be? Do you know, I'm really happy with me, so I'm going to be me.
Oh,
no,
brother.
Yeah. I'm not doing that. I'd like to be able to fly. I don't want to be an animal though, but I would like to have like a humanoid body. I want to be super duper fit, but not have to do any exercise. So I want to be like super duper strong and like shredded all year round.
Well, I think that goes into like eating whatever you want and not getting fat.
Yeah. Okay. I want that skill as a human, but I want to be able to fly as well.
Okay.
Okay.
Fair. So you want to be Neo?
Yes. Yes, I want to be Neo. Well, to be fair, you get to be an animorph, so I'm going to be an animorph too. I'm going to animorph into a condor. I'm going to be a condor.
Oh, okay.
Oh, boy.
Okay.
Cam knows what I'm referencing.
I do.
The eagle has landed. Well, I think it's knock list time, folks. Now, Cam, we have a guest. Dannie is here. Please explain what the knock list is and what we do here.
Yes, the knock list is our tortured acronym for need to see official classics of the SpyHards podcast, where every week after we've talked about a movie, we vote as to whether it belongs in kind of the all-timers list. Like, we're trying to compile a list of the all-time great spy films you could give someone and say, here you go, watch these. They're going to teach you about the genre and you're going to really enjoy the experience. So we've got stuff like, Goldfinger's on there, North by Northwest, Born Supremacy,
Spy Kids.
The first Spy Kids. So we're looking at making it a very diverse list, one to look at the genre from all angles, not just the classic, Bond or more serious Tinker Tailor kind of spy film.
Yeah, so guests always get the first vote. Dannie, yes or no, is Ghost in the Shell going on the list of the best spy movies of all time?
Yes.
Okay.
Only because it's a staple in the anime industry.
Mm-hmm.
So, and it also inspired numerous of Hollywood movies. So it's definitely a staple and an iconic movie. And it changed the life of sci-fi.
Yeah.
Drastically.
Mm-hmm. Okay. There's no doubt this film's credentials when it comes to influencing cinema, television, all these sorts of things going forward. So that, yeah, very fair points. That's one yes. It's all to play for. Cam, what about you?
It's a yes for me as well. I think just like I am a huge fan of visionary spectacle on film, and that's something this movie delivers. And as obviously it's made in 1995, it holds up beautifully. And also, like, as someone who doesn't have this wide breadth of knowledge with anime, it's one where I can at least look at it historically and say this movie is very important in informing a lot of the entertainment that I love. And so I always take, historical context. That's not an automatic in on the knock list, but in a case where a movie is fantastically entertaining, plus has that going for it in its favor, to me, it's a yes.
Okay. This is that magic moment where there's two yeses, and so my vote means absolutely nothing. So I'm going to go away with what I think my original answer would have been. I'm going to go with no. I think I would have gone with yes if it was more of an in contention. I wanted it to make the knock list, but I wanted to put a little asterisk next to it, that in the sense of it perhaps isn't spy enough for me.
I disagree. I think when you have this AI that's been created to be basically an enemy spy and take part, like they even mentioned spycraft, and these majors are having to go in, and they very much separate what the major and her team are doing versus like the police, who are these faceless beings. Like they are very much a secret agent organization going on these missions. So I think it's pretty spy. It's just not underlining it. It's underlining more the sci-fi concepts.
I just think back to like when we did Men in Black really early on, and that first one was, we both were big fans, but I think what knocked it back off of the knock list was it just wasn't very spy enough. And I just think I would put this in that same sort of category, whereas there's elements, but it's not like, there's no secret agent. You know what I mean?
They don't really identify, like, Motoko doesn't, she doesn't say, hey, I'm a spy. Like, they don't.
What spy would, though?
Yeah, yeah, that's true. They're just, they don't really say they're like from, they don't identify themselves as like CIA or the FBI or anything like that. Like they're just Section 9, and that's all you know. And when you hear Section 9, you just think, oh, that has to be a special agent thing that happens in this world kind of thing. So, but I can understand where you're coming from. And I will say, this movie is definitely more on the sci-fi versus like, spy, quote unquote, you would categorize it as. So
yeah, I wanted it to make the knock list. I just think I needed to put that tiny little asterisk next to it to be like, there's like an element that if people are going to read the knock list, they'll see this and be like, huh? Like,
right,
trust
yeah.
us, it's
Yeah.
a good one, but you'll
Yeah.
have to think about it. And that's all I'm trying to say with that one.
Yeah, that's fair. I will see. I see your point. So
Cam's usually up to argue with me a bit more. So have you got anything else for me?
No, I mean, I do agree. It doesn't foreground the spy elements the way that something like, I don't know, maybe Golgo 13 would or something.
Okay. Well, there we go, folks. 2 yeses, 1 no. Ghost in the Shell 1995 is making the knock list. Congratulations. The dossier on the film is complete and filed as classified. Danny, I have a question for you.
I may have an answer.
It's a good start. It's a good reply.
That's what makes you a good podcaster.
Quick off the mark. I like that. So, Ghost in the Shell made it. Could you recommend our listeners and us, because we're probably going to write these down, a couple of other spy anime films?
Okay. So when you originally asked me to look this up before we started recording, and I did a little deep dive, and frankly, there really aren't any anime films that are kind of spy related, at least not to what I would consider a spy movie. But I do have to say I have 3 recommendations. And one of them is actually a movie, and we actually talked about it earlier, and it's Jin-Roh, The Wolf Brigade. So I would say that would be the closest next to Ghost in the Shell that is sort of like that cop special agent forces spy movie, which our friend Mamoru Oshii wrote that manga, because the original source for that movie is a manga, and that manga is called Hellhounds Panzer Cops. So
Great name.
And yeah, right. So I totally recommend watching that film. Absolutely. And even if you go on AniList, which is kind of the source on where I keep track of all the shows and movies that are anime that I try and keep up, because there's a lot that like I can't not have a list where I need to keep track on what I watch.
Oh, we love lists here. Don't worry.
Yeah.
All good.
So, but you can watch Jin-Roh on Crunchyroll, Tubi TV, Retro Crush. You can also watch it on Amazon. So it's easily found. And the 2 shows that I have is one is Moriarty the Patriot, which that recently aired, that actually aired in fall of 2020, and that's also based off of a manga, and it pretty much boils down, and it's based off of Arthur Conan Doyle's Sherlock Holmes, but instead of it focusing on Sherlock Holmes, it focuses on Professor Moriarty, and it portrays his younger days and how he and his brothers rid the world of corrupted nobles. It's fairly interesting. I wouldn't really call it spy, but it's in that like detective cop kind of scenario. So that you can watch on Funimation, Crunchyroll, and Netflix, depending on the region and your country and stuff. And then lastly is Spy X Family. Now this is actually about spies.
Okay.
This is currently airing. It is based on a manga by Tatsuya Endo, which is still ongoing, and it's serializing in Shonen Jump Plus. The main protag is the top spy, codenamed Twilight, receives a mission which requires him to go form a temporary family undercover. Agent Twilight now goes by the name Lloyd Forger. Goes to an adoption center, finding Anya, who absolutely steals the show, by the way. Like, she is the most adorable little girl you will ever see, who is telepathic. And then the mother figure, her name is Yor, and when you first meet her, she seems a little normal, a little ditzy, but in reality, she's actually one of the top assassins ever. So it's pretty interesting.
Definitely a different spin on the whole thing.
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
It's actually, right now, it's one of the top most talked about anime of the season right now. Everyone is talking about it. It has a nice retro 60s retro feeling to it. The music is great, visual wise, like cinematography and stuff. Beautiful. Like, it has that like Eastern New England kind of feel to it and everything. The characters are great. Like, the chemistry for all of the characters are amazing, especially when it comes to Anya. And I'm really excited to watch the rest of it. So, and you can watch that on Crunchyroll, Hulu, Netflix, again, depending on your region. I'm assuming it's mostly available in Japan, Netflix Japan. And it's also available on Disney Plus, but I don't know if that's actually true. I didn't really confirm that, but Crunchyroll and Hulu, for sure, you'll be able to stream it.
Yeah, definitely a smorgasbord there to check out. We'll put notes down in the show notes there for those three, so you can go check out if you want some more anime. I might check out that film, actually, see if we can work that into our list to cover down the road. If it seems close enough, I'll take a look at it.
Yeah, it's I mean, even if it's not, it's really enjoyable.
Okay.
So,
well, the next thing I have to say, Danny, is I want to thank you for taking the time out to speak to us today, and thank you to the Anime Summit listeners who've come over to have a listen as well.
Yeah.
For the listeners of this show, can you just tell us a little bit more about the Anime Summit and what you're doing over there?
Yeah, Anime Summit, I mean, we strictly talk about anime, obviously. We do a lot of, not just reviews, but we also do some, like, tier lists. We also have Summit Smackdowns. So what we do in those bits is we take a category and we just take characters from that genre or that type of theme that we're doing for that SmackDown, and we ask other guests to come on and we kind of just talk about like which character is better, and we just kind of eliminate a 16 bracket and see who's the winner of that SmackDown. So, and
nice.
We're about to have another one, which I'm super excited for.
Well, where can people find you online? Like, are you on most major podcast platforms?
Yeah. So, Anime Summit is on what is it? Apple Music, or I keep calling it iTunes. So, yeah, you can find us on any sort of podcast listening platform, Spotify, Google Podcasts, Podcast Addicts, anywhere that you can find it. We also upload our episodes on YouTube as well. So, and we also have extra content on YouTube. Sometimes, although we're not too active on that, but I'm hoping to change that. Being with my new setup that I have, I'm hoping to do more streams for like video games and all that kind of stuff. So, and we have a Patreon, so you can always join us there. We have exclusive content on there, and we also have Twitter and Instagram, but we mainly thrive on Discord. So if you ever want to join the Discord, you can do that. And our link is links.animesummit.net. And that's where all the social links and even like where you can find our podcasts are.
Perfect. We'll put that in the show notes below as well. So click on that.
Yes.
People, if you want to hear more. But Dannie, thank you for joining us.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate doing this. This is always fun going on to other podcasts that aren't anime. So this is actually a lot of fun. I really enjoyed myself.
Your tuxedo and martini glass are in the post.
Oh, thank you. Okay, cool. I want an onion, not an olive, though.
Oh, we're done here. We're done here.
I'm kidding. I love the olives.
Good. Okay, we're back on firm ground here. Whew, I was going to delete this whole episode. Okay.
Oh no.
Well, there you go, folks. Ghost in the Shell from 1995 made Knotlist. If you want to find out more about the Knotlist, go to letterboxd.com/SpyHards. You can find out the films that made it and the films that didn't. But Cam, what are we talking about next week?
We are tackling the 1934 spy thriller British Agent, directed by Michael Curtiz and starring Leslie Howard.
Oh, finally, my biopic. I'm glad we get round to this.
That's right. And this movie, it is 1934. It is available pretty much anywhere you want it. You can stream it on, Apple Movies and Amazon Prime and all that sort of stuff. As well, if you search it on YouTube, it is there.
Oh, the full version's on there?
It is, yeah.
Oh, perfect. Well, there you go. Easy one for you folks. I'll even post a link online when we announce the film. So your mission, should you choose to accept it, is to check out British Agent and join us next week. Now, please consider leaving us a 5-star review wherever you get your podcasts, be that Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Podchaser, or anything of the like. It really just helps get the show out there and shares the Spy Hard love. And speaking of, do not forget to follow us discreetly on social media at SpyHards. That's SpyHards on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. But until next week, listeners, remember, there's nothing sadder than a puppet without a ghost.
Do you love spy books, movies, and TV? Then the Spybrary podcast is for you. Since 2017, host Shane Whaley and Spybrary field agents around the world dispatch reviews and interviews with authors, historians, and fellow spy fans. We discuss everything from John le Carré, Len Dayton, Paul Viddich, Graham Greene, Mick Herron, Charles Cumming, Ben McIntyre, and many more. Spybrary is available on all good podcast apps and at spybrary.com.